With the theft of the Death Star plans during the Battle of Scarif, the Rebel Alliance had hopes of beating the Empire. To recover them, Tarkin sent Darth Vader in pursuit, but that pursuit would have consequences neither of the Emperor's henchmen could have predicted. Welcome to the Wizards and Warriors channel. We're glad to have you with us for our third jump into the Star Wars universe and our next episode on the Galactic Civil War. So please get comfortable, make sure your hyperdrive is functional and provisions stocked, and listen to the story of the Battle of Yavin. Space battles in Star Wars are heavily inspired by naval battles of our own history, and you can see what was so compelling about them with the sponsor of this video, World of Warships. This free-to-play PC game collects together over 400 historical warships for stunning team-based sea battles where you'll develop real naval strategies to win. Utilize the features of its beautiful maps, adapt to or exploit changing weather conditions, and master the 5 types of warship: destroyers, battleships, cruisers, aircraft carriers, and submarines. All commanded by over 44 million other players, and all with customizable loadouts and looks. And if you want something a little different, World of Warships changes things up with limited time events and missions. Previously you could collab with Godzilla, battle giant monsters from Big Hunt, or play as characters from Azur Lane. Stay in the fight to see what special content comes up next. Download the game via the link in the description to get a huge starter pack. Use our code FIRE while registering to get 200 doubloons, the premium battleship USS Texas, 20 Restless Fire camouflage, 1 million credits, and 7 days of premium account. With the Death Star's plans on board, Tantive IV's captain, Ramus Antilles, set course for Tatooine, which was its original destination before the Scarif operation, hoping to evade the pursuit of Vader's Devastator. On board the Tantive IV was the daughter of one of the leaders of the rebellion, Bail Organa, Princess Leia, and her mission was to find the Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi, who had been in exile since the Great Jedi Purge. He was to be given the Death Star plans and then escorted to Alderaan. However, the Devastator managed to follow Tantive into hyperspace, and upon exit, crippled the rebel ship in a matter of minutes, drawing it within its hangar, ignoring the ship's broadcast of being on a diplomatic mission. The rebels attempted to use the escape pods, but the first ones were shot down by the Devastator, so they resolved to stand and fight. As stormtroopers were about to breach the ship, Leia gave the plans to an astromech, designated R2-D2, ordering it to go to the surface in one of the pods and deliver her message and the plans to Kenobi. The ship was boarded and a brief firefight broke out in the halls, resulting in the death of nearly all of the Alderaanian consular security force. However, their resistance allowed R2-D2 and the protocol droid C-3PO to escape in a pod, which the Imperials didn't shoot at, detecting no organics. The droids landed in the desert with no settlement for miles, and were then captured by Jawas, native inhabitants of the planet who specialized in scavenging abandoned items such as droids and selling them. As such, their captivity was not long, as they were sold by them to a moisture farmer named Owen Lars. While they were in his care, Owen's nephew, Luke Skywalker, discovered Princess Leia's message and sought to find this Kenobi, thinking it may be the hermit Ben who lived nearby. Despite C-3PO's protest, R2-D2 struck out alone the next day, determined to deliver this message, which forced Luke and C-3PO to go out and recover him. However, they were set upon by another native group, Tusken Raiders, and were nearly killed until the hermit Ben arrived, scaring the raiders away. He confirmed that he was the legendary Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then took the trio back to his home. Seeing Leia's message, he realized that he couldn't stay out of the war and decided to go to Alderaan. He attempted to recruit Luke, revealing that he was the son of his old friend and a very powerful Jedi, Anakin Skywalker, who was killed by Kenobi's apprentice, Vader. Initially, Luke refused to join Kenobi on the way to Alderaan, but soon after returning home, he discovered the remains of his aunt and uncle, and his home burnt to ash, most likely by the Imperial stormtroopers who were still searching for the droids. With no other option, and eager to avenge his family, Luke joined Kenobi. They made their way to Mos Eisley Spaceport and hired the captain of a Corellian YT-1300 light freighter, the Millennium Falcon, Han Solo, and his Wookiee co-pilot Chewbacca. Eager to pay off the debt to a local crime lord, Jabba the Hutt, Solo accepted Kenobi's lucrative offer, and the unlikely crew set off from Tatooine, despite an attack by stormtroopers that came too late. Meanwhile, Leia was now detained on the Death Star, which was in the Alderaan system, and the Emperor used her involvement with the Rebel Alliance to finally put an end to the Galactic Senate, dissolving the body entirely. Palpatine, now no longer constrained by the protection of senatorial status, imprisoned many of the senators on Coruscant, ending the threat the rebels had posed from within. The completed Death Star was the most powerful force in the galaxy, and so there was no longer a need to retain control of the galaxy through the use of the Senate. The might of the Empire was the only thing keeping the planetary system at bay, and the threat of the Death Star would keep them quiet, but the Emperor and Tarkin knew that a show of force and a demonstration of the power of their new weapon was needed. Among those now no longer protected by their senatorial status was Princess Leia, who was tortured at length for the location of the main rebel base. As the torture failed to work, Tarkin threatened to blow her home planet up if she refused to provide the location of the rebels. Leia tried to deceive her captor and named the planet Dantooine, the rebel base that was abandoned previously. Despite that, Tarkin ordered the Death Star to destroy Alderaan, which was considered one of the centers of the rebellion and thus was a threat. More than 2 billion civilians were killed in the destruction of the planet, among them Bail Organa. The news of its destruction spread rapidly, terrifying some, while stealing the resolve of others. The Alderaanians on Coruscant held a vigil that turned into a riot that lasted for several days, but they were put down brutally by the stormtroopers. Many Alderaanians and their sympathizers joined the rebellion. Meanwhile, having successfully escaped and arrived in Alderaanian space, the Millennium Falcon was seemingly caught in a meteor shower, but as it ventured further, the crew was puzzled as to why Alderaan was not there. Kenobi, who felt the death of the billions in the Force, said it was the Empire's doing, and that they had destroyed the planet, but this was dismissed by Solo, who said not even an entire fleet could have done this. Before they could learn the truth, the Falcon was attacked by a single TIE fighter acting as a scout, which Solo followed, believing he could destroy it, with no Imperial bases around him to escape to or get help from. What he originally thought to be a moon was soon discovered to be the Death Star, which the scout had been luring them to, and they were caught in its tractor beam before they could escape, and were taken aboard. Using Solo's smuggler tactics, Kenobi's Jedi skills, and R2's hacking, the crew of the Falcon managed to not only avoid capture, but disabled the tractor beam and freed Princess Leia, saving her from execution. However, when they had almost escaped, the crew was accosted by Darth Vader. The Emperor's enforcer, who had waited a long time to avenge his previous crippling defeat at Kenobi's hands, was eager to destroy his old master, and the two began to duel. It started with Kenobi's taunt. "You cannot win, Darth. If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine." Vader took a very cautious approach, which was uncharacteristic of his style, but he knew just how dangerous Kenobi was, and the old Jedi was just trying to distract Vader and the stormtroopers, which allowed the crew to make their way to the Falcon. Upon seeing that, Kenobi stopped fighting, letting Vader strike him. However, once the blow found its mark, Kenobi vanished, with nothing left but his saber and a slashed robe. The duel gave the crew of the Falcon enough time to board their ship, and the freighter escaped from the Death Star hangar. A half-dozen Imperial TIE fighters were sent to pursue them, but the rebels were able to destroy the enemy starships, making the jump to hyperspace and the safety of Yavin 4. The crew was in a celebratory mood, but Leia knew that the Imperials had let them escape and had probably placed a tracker on the ship, but hoped that the Death Star plans might swing the battle in their favor. When they arrived, the plans were immediately given to General Dodonna for assessment, and soon Galen's design flaw was found and the plan conceived. Dodonna decided to send the remaining pilots of Gold, Red and Green Starfighter squadrons alone against the Death Star, as the monstrous station would have a harder time hitting them than any medium or heavy craft. the pilots were ordered to attack a single 2-meter wide exhaust port with their proton torpedoes, which, once successfully entered, would go all the way down to the reactor chamber and set off a reaction that would destroy the Death Star. Not long after, the Death Star arrived in the system and began orbiting Yavin Prime to get into position to fire at its moon, Yavin 4, situated on the other side of the planet. Luke joined Red Squadron as a pilot with his childhood friend Biggs. Solo, meanwhile, had received his payment for his aid and left Yavin to pay his debts, intending to not be part of the battle to come. To many, this seemed like a suicide mission, but the pilots sent out were invigorated and could be counted on to fight till the last. The rebel forces consisted of 22 T-65B X-Wing starfighters that were divided between Red Squadron, commanded by Gavin Drace, and Green Squadron, commanded by an unknown pilot. The X-Wings were to serve as a distraction as well as an escort for the 8 BTL A4 Y-Wing bombers of Gold Squadron, commanded by John Vander, as the bombers were supposed to make an attack run through the Meridian Trench of the Death Star, which was guarded by 20 turbo lasers, and then to the exhaust port. The Imperial force was made up of the battle station itself, the Death Star, which had 15,000 turbo laser guns, along with 768 tractor beam emplacements, and was complemented by several hundred TIE fighter squadrons within its hangars. The Death Star was also accompanied by the Imperial II-class Star Destroyer Fortitude, but this ship was used in a defensive posture. The rebel squadrons exited the surface of Yavin 4 and made their way towards the target, and with 15 minutes left for the Death Star to get into firing position, they confirmed their numbers, locked their S-foils into attack position, beginning the Battle of Yavin. Just as Dodonna had assessed, the Death Star's surface guns were too widely dispersed and too slow to catch the starfighters, which dodged and picked them off with relative ease. With these reports coming in, Darth Vader ordered his personal Black Squadron to attack, determining that the battle would have to be won in ship-to-ship combat. Vader's appearance proved to be enough to start changing the situation, but wasn't entirely enough, as he was fighting the best fighters the Rebel Alliance had to offer, and they were a match for any of his best Imperial pilots. Determining the way was safe, Commander Vander took Gold 2 and Gold 5 with him to make the first attack run into the trench. They entered and navigated most of it with relative ease, as the defensive guns stopped shooting at them. At this point, Darth Vader entered the trench after them in his TIE Advanced, accompanied by 2 TIE fighters, and himself destroyed all 3 of the ships and exited the trench. As the battle still raged, Imperial officers analysed the rebel attack and discovered the flaw in the Death Star that could be fatal, but Tarkin dismissed this, saying, "Evacuate, in our moment of triumph. I think you overestimate their chances." With 3 minutes left for the Death Star to get to its shooting angle, Commander Dries took Red 10 and Red 12 to begin the second attack run. Although they knew that the Imperial TIE fighters would show up again, they took the same path, as it was now easy to traverse. Indeed, Vader was in pursuit again, and managed to destroy Red 10 and Red 12 soon. Drace got in range and launched his torpedoes, but was unable to hit the target. He was then chased and cut down by Vader. With only 1 minute to spare, Luke took command of the next attack run and entered the Meridian Trench at a high speed, accompanied by Wedge Antilles' Red 2 and Biggs Darklighter's Red 3. His wingmates hung back to cover him from the enemy fighters, while Luke himself attacked the target. Just like clockwork, the guns fell silent and Vader and his support arrived. The Imperials quickly caught up with the X-Wings, damaging Red 2, who was ordered to disengage by Luke. The chase continued on, with Vader letting the ship flee, and now it was left to Luke's friend Biggs to distract the TIE fighters long enough to allow Luke to take his shot. However, soon his craft was severely damaged and then destroyed before he could pull up, leaving Luke as the only fighter left to complete the mission. He turned on his targeting system, knowing that at any moment now the battle would either be won or lost. But as he drew closer, he heard the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi telling him to rely on the Force and trust his feelings. Vader sensed this disturbance in the Force and became intrigued by this pilot, finding it harder to hit him. Luke trusted Kenobi and turned off his computer to the alarm of the rebel base and confirmed he would proceed without it. Just as Vader had locked on to Luke, the ship guarding his right suddenly burst into flames, catching Vader off guard. It was the Millennium Falcon arriving overhead. Its cannons forced Vader's wingmate to dodge, and the TIE fighter hit Vader's vessel, sending it careening into space. With his flank secured, Luke took the shot, with both torpedoes finding their mark, and he pulled off, accompanied by what remained of the rebel force. With the Death Star's laser set to go off, the station exploded from the chain reaction caused by Luke's torpedo. The explosion sent shrapnel throughout the system and heavily damaged the nearby Fortitude, which forced it to retreat. Despite the fact that the Empire still retained nearly all of its fleet and still controlled most of the worlds, the battle was disastrous for its rule. The Death Star explosion not only cost them thousands of highly qualified officers, but the political fallout was devastating, as with no Death Star to serve as a threat, the Emperor's will would be hard to maintain. But while this was a major victory for the rebellion, the war was far from over. Our series on the Galactic Civil War will continue soon, and we're planning to cover the battles throughout many fantasy universes and sci-fi sagas, so make sure you have subscribed and pressed the bell button. Please consider liking and sharing, as that helps immensely. We'll try to read and respond to every comment, as we want to see what you think about this video and which videos you hope to see in the future. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.